We've actually had a bunch of news today where usually you don't get it on a Monday, but let's go through everything real quick. Juwan Jennings expected to come back week 10. Ricky Pearsall was very interesting this past week. Like I said, I drafted a crap ton of Pearsall in underdog drafts, so I really hope he does well. But really, if Jennings is going to be back this early, I would move Pearsall down my rest of season ranks. Just because if we look at what we had earlier in the year, they are typically using Jennings more so as that prototypical wide receiver. They were getting Pearsall a lot of those manufactured touches with like the jet sweeps and such. So looking at Pearsall, we had him ahead of Dobbs, Downs, Rome in our rest of season rankings, and Addison. I think we probably moved Pearsall down to about wide receiver 44, right behind guys like Myers, Addison, and Rome Odunze. And then we are actually probably going to be moving Juwan Jennings up here a bit. I think that I probably would prefer Jennings over Sticky Ricky rest of season. I hope I'm wrong with that, but I mean, just going through and looking at what we had with Jennings when fully healthy. Shanahan says McCaffrey will participate in simulated practices this week, obviously during the bye. The 49ers aiming to get him in practice next week. So this is just the continued drumbeat. We've had this now for about 2 weeks where the Niners are preparing everybody that McCaffrey is going to be coming back after the bye. So if you have not already, I know some people were confused on why we have CMC so high in our rest of season ranks, quote unquote, so high as RB12. I mean, we know a fully healthy McCaffrey, he's running back one. It's not even really close. He's in his own tier. Now, obviously, there's still inherent risk that you have with CMC. Like, I'm not taking him over Achane, Taylor, Bijan, Walker, Gibbs by any means. But still, at the same time, you have the high ceiling. You do have some risk, but things are trending in the right direction, and I would be valuing CMC as that low-end RB1, high-end RB2 rest of season. Could be a lot better than that, too. Going over to Debo, he's considered day-to-day. Great news with Debo Samuel. I mean, here, obviously, we didn't know exactly what to expect with the rib injury at the end of last week. Looking at this, I think you could make an argument to move Debo ahead of Kupp and London if you wanted, just knowing that having no Brandon Ayuk, obviously, this is a very good offense going into the future. Debo Samuel should have a very large role. Jordan Mason re-aggravated the shoulder injury, will be evaluated after the bye week. It seems like Jordan Mason's time's done. It seems like this is the timing that you're going to get CMC returning, while at the same time, Mason himself is injured. So we have already plummeted Jordan Mason down our rest of season rankings. Jordan Mason, where did we put this dude? We have him down here at RB34. I don't want to move him much lower than this yet, but there is that outside chance that if you actually end up getting in, I don't know. Christian McCaffrey back this next week. Mason's still injured, and Isaac Guerrero turns into the RB2. Jordan Mason very easily could fall well behind this. And you could be looking at Jordan Mason falling to the range of like Braylon Allen is just pretty much a premium handcuff back. Like that is a possibility. Now, obviously, it's not a guarantee McCaffrey will be back in, so I'm still going to prefer Jordan Mason over the guys like Algier, Braylon Allen, et cetera, et cetera. Stephon Diggs, Dameon Pierce did not participate in practice on Monday. We don't really have the up-to-date news with Diggs with his specific injury. At least last I saw, I would be very surprised if Stephon Diggs ends up playing on Thursday. My matchup actually this next week in the Flock League has Stephon Diggs, and that was pretty much his only player. He's the worst team in the league. So your boy looks like he's maybe moving to 6-3 in his league, which I cannot be more excited about. But yeah, if you have Diggs, I want to be counting on anything. Tank Dell's probably going to be somebody you have to start this next week. Now, looking at Allen Lazard, he is considered week to week, not expected to be placed on the IR. We were already saying this last week, but I do want to reiterate now again that Allen Lazard's very easy a drop in fantasy. Best case scenario, you're the third option in a bad offense. Why would you hold this dude on your roster any longer than you have? Like, I honestly may even prefer Elijah freaking Moore over Allen Lazard at this point. Roman Wilson is going to be placed on the IR. This has no impact in regular fantasy football leagues. Freaking sucks for my underdog teams, though. T. Higgins considered day-to-day. That's great news. Obviously, you are wanting T. Higgins to come back into this Bengals offense this next week. The Bengals are pretty much in a mode now that every game turns into a must-win for them. And getting Higgins back as soon as possible would help them out a considerable amount. So the head coach in Indy comes out and says, Anthony Richardson, we're evaluating essentially everything. So there is an outside chance that you actually have Flacco under center for the Colts, which if that were to occur, then obviously you're going to have a massive bump up to the Colts receivers in the rest of season rankings. How things stand right now, we don't have either Pittman or Downs as players that you should be excited about. We have Downs wide receiver 40 in our rest of season rankings. We have Pittman down at about wide receiver, I don't even know. Where did we put Pittman? 48, right behind like McMillan, Jamison Williams, and Ricky Pearsall. If we end up getting Flacco in, Josh Downs jumps over Dobbs, Shakir, Keon, Ridley, Mooney, Worthy, JSN. Like, he probably moves up to wide receiver 30-ish as somebody that you could probably plug and play as a flex every single week. Obviously not as excited about Pittman, but Pittman would rise as well. Saints optimistic that Derek Carr will play week 9. Yeah, expectations you're going to have Derek Carr back in. That's why we're very, very aggressive on what you have with our ranking of Chris Olave rest of season. I think Olave is one of the best buy low candidates in all of fantasy football. Going over to our next thing. Above means diagnosed with a high ankle sprain literally has no impact whatsoever. Now, Jordan Love considered day-to-day as a shot to play week 9. Obviously, this is a very important game for the Packers in that they are going up against the best team in their division with the Lions. Lions arguably one of the best teams in the entire NFL at this point. So you really want Love in for this game if you're a Packers fan, if you just want to watch a good football game. Realistically speaking, you have the bye week in week 10. Jordan Love's already taken a bunch of wear and tear. This isn't Jordan Love's first injury so far this season. So actually, I wouldn't mind at all to see Jordan Love kind of just sit this one out, get fully healthy in the week 10 bye, come back week 11 as a guarantee. For me, I think that would almost be a better situation here, but obviously there is that chance that we just see Jordan Love come back this week, and then all of a sudden Jaden Reed is a must-start player, of course. Now, going over to our next name, we're going to be looking at Stephon Diggs still being evaluated. We just don't have anything with Diggs. I moved him off my rankings completely on the site. Once we get news, maybe if Diggs is only going to be missing a couple weeks, maybe only missing a month, then at that point, we're going to move him up dramatically. But as it stands right now, I wouldn't assume that Stephon Diggs is anything now. You'll see, I actually updated my rankings earlier today. As soon as we had this news that Brian Thomas Jr. could miss 2 to 4 weeks, still getting a second opinion. So I moved Brian Thomas Jr. down to about wide receiver 23, right in the same mark as Mike Evans. Honestly, if Brian Thomas Jr. was set to miss 2 to 4 weeks, keep in mind he has the bye week, I believe, in week 12. So you could see him miss weeks 9, 10, 11, bye week 12, not get this guy back until the final 2 weeks of the regular season. And in that kind of situation, you're going to get more games played for Evans. But then afterwards, we actually have Peterson coming out and saying that Brian Thomas Jr. is considered day-to-day. And he has a chance to play week 9. So I think with that, you maybe give a little bit of boost. I don't know what to expect with Thomas. Obviously, I'd be concerned if you needed to rely upon him this week, but before this injury news, we had Brian Thomas Jr. up as, a low in wide receiver 1, high in wide receiver 2. So maybe we just throw him right back there. Realistically, I feel like there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around this injury right now where I can't see anything official. Obviously, Jameis is going to remain the Browns starting quarterback going forward. That'd be hilarious if Jameis had the best Browns game that we've seen since last season and they decide not to roll with him. Now, Deontae Johnson expected to be traded by next week. So let's think through this. Can you please let me know in the live chat right now, where would you expect that Deontae Johnson gets dealt to? Because here, obviously, we can say, okay, with Deontae Johnson, it's not like he's as old as DeAndre Hopkins. It's not like he's as old as Devontae Adams. It's not like he's as old as Amari Cooper, but still at the same time, I would expect that Diontae would only get traded to a contending team. There's no way in hell a rebuilding team decides to trade for him. Like the Pats aren't trading for Deontae Johnson. and we go through and look at this. So looking at the chat, we got Commanders, but Commanders actually, I think that's a great call. Bucks, I think is a great call. The issue is it's in division, of course. Saints, I don't see the Saints making that move. The Ravens, I think that'd be a great move. 49ers. The Steelers, in my mind, are the team that needs him the most. Now, I don't know what terms that situation is. I don't know if the Steelers would want to go out there and potentially make the play for Diontae. But if they were willing to, like looking at that, I would say the Steelers probably have the worst wide receiver 2 or one of the worst wide receiver 2s in the entire NFL right now. We've seen them have success alongside each other, so I don't know. I think the Steelers would make a ton of sense. But anyway, looking at the potential trade targets, Bills out of the picture. They went out and got Amari. Chiefs, I mean, if the price isn't too high, I still think that you could very easily see the Chiefs go out there for somebody like Deontae Johnson. The Broncos, I mean, you have the quarterback on the rookie deal. The Broncos are technically 5-3. I think that they could use that second receiver. I think the Chargers could use a second receiver. Chargers 4-3. The Steelers could use one, 5-2. The Ravens could use one. They're 5-3. The Texans obviously could use one post Diggs injury. They're 6-2. I mean, there are just so many teams that could use a receiver that are contending right now. The Commanders could use one who are currently 6-2. The Niners could use a receiver post Ayuk injury. I would say maybe that's about it. Obviously, you have the Bucks. I just don't know if the Panthers would want to make that trade in division. So there are a lot of good landing spots for Deontae Johnson. Very difficult to rank the dude right now. Obviously, he's not playing. We have Deontae Johnson, wide receiver 30 in our rest of season ranks, right behind guys like Hopkins, Pickens, Amari, and DJ Moore. Could y'all please spam the chat? Would you rather have Deontae Johnson or George Pickens rest of season? Or let's not even do that. Deontae Johnson or DeAndre Hopkins? Would you rather have Deontae or Hopkins? Obviously, Hopkins a bum this past week, but doesn't play a full slate of snaps. You have Mahomes going forward. We got Deontae Hopkins, Deontae Hopkins, Deontae depending on team. Yeah, but you don't get to choose a team right now. Hopkins, Deontae, Hopkins. I personally just don't know what to expect, obviously, without seeing the landing spot just yet. I mean, a lot of those spots, like the Commanders, would be a great real-life fit. The Ravens would be a great real-life fit. They're great offenses, but it's not like there's a ton of passing volume there in Washington. So, realistically speaking, I think some landing spots could be a great real-life spot for Diontae. Wouldn't it be great for fantasy purposes? I'm going through and looking at anything else that has fantasy relevance here from the news of the day. Not necessarily. I don't think that there is much else to talk about on that front. So let's move over and let's get to some of the questions that we have on the site. Obviously, we are continuing to update our rankings on the site pretty much every single day. If you ever wanted to go out there and if you wanted to check out my rankings in particular, you'd always see the expert average rankings on the site for completely free. That's the expert average of everybody here. If you wanted to sort by my rankings, you would just hit Mason Dodd, and then it goes through and sorts by mine. Another thing with this, of course, is we're going to be answering all the questions through flockfantasy.com, and we do this literally every single day. You don't even have to be in the live stream to ask a question, because once we answer it in a stream, you're going to get a custom link with the exact timestamps of when I answered your question sent to you. Just go hit the expert advice button in the top right corner, and there you can actually send in a super message, a start sit question, a trade question, or get a full-blown team review, whatever you're wanting. And like I said, you don't need to even be in the live stream to send one of these in. You don't even have to attend the live stream to see your answer, because we're going to send it directly to you through the site as soon as it's answered. But if you did want a full-blown team review, I would highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have over there on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, when you are new to Underdog Fantasy, you actually get a free pick. The free pick for today would be Russell Wilson, more than less than half a total yard. And we're actually getting you an additional free pick at the moment. Malik Neighbors, more than less than half a total yard as well, only with code FLOCK. But if you wanted that free team review, just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com after you make your deposit on Underdog, or before, it doesn't matter, but they just have to have the same email address so I know who to credit with that free team review voucher. But let's go ahead and let's pull this up for our first free team review. This is going to be from Connor. So, hey Mason, I already traded for Hall, Brown, and Hurts. Looking to make making more moves for the playoffs. Appreciate your insight. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking advantage of that free Underdog pick and the free team review. But anyway, looking at this, team name Caleb's Nails. We are currently sitting at the 2 spot with the league analyzer. It's a 10-team format, so you should be in a situation in which you're in a good spot to find players off the waiver wire consistently, where you're not having to worry about the waiver wire being depleted. But you also can start up to 4 receivers weekly. So with that being said as well, it is a situation in which, I don't know. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, let's go through and let's make this 2-for-1 deal where we sell the wide receiver depth piece to get an upgrade inside the starting lineup. It's a little bit more nuanced. But going over to quarterback, we are currently sitting with Jalen Hurts. Obviously, when we have Hurts, you're able to start him every single week, regardless of the matchup. I mean, before we had the massive day here as a rusher, he was my quarterback 2 rest of season. After the massive day, he's still my quarterback 2, only behind Lamar, already through the bye week as well. So definitely don't need to roster a second quarterback here. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with the combo of Breece Hall as our RB1. With Breece, we can start him every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. You have the receiving usage. The issue that maybe keeps him from being in the tier with like Saquon Barkley and Kyron Williams is now you're seeing again with this coaching staff, they're also getting some involvement here for Braylon Allen, which previously they didn't. So it is a little bit frustrating to see that. Going over to what you're looking at with Josh Jacobs. Jacobs is a stupid simple guy to look at in that he's a 3-down running back in one of the best offenses in the league. Now, obviously, with that being said, with the Jordan Love injury, maybe you're lowering your expectations with this offense. But still, nonetheless, really excited to have Jacobs as RB2. Chase Brown, Rashad White as our RB3-4 combo. Gives us the nice depth with the ceiling play as well. Looking at what we have with Alexander Mattison, I think it's a very easy spot to say that we have no value for Alexander Mattison on this roster. Like, it's not like you need the running back that just gets the guaranteed opportunity but has a cap ceiling. So for me personally, I would see if we could potentially go through and look to move off of Mattison, where if you could potentially sell Mattison in a 2-for-1 deal to go get an upgrade elsewhere, I think that could make a lot of sense. Now, obviously, it comes down to what that price point is. It comes down to who we can take advantage of that possibly needs a running back. Issue is it's going to be a 10-team format, so the teams that need a running back, there aren't going to be many. I mean, this team's dealing with both the Pacheco and Travis Etienne injury. They are currently 2-5. I mean, a couple different things that we could do. One, we could try to potentially go ahead and trade Alexander Mattison just straight up for one of the running backs like Pacheco that we don't know if he's going to come back or not yet, but if Pacheco comes back, he has the upside of actually making a difference on your team. Whereas I just don't see how you ever start Alexander Mattison. Another potential move that you could look to make, of course, is taking Alexander Mattison and another piece and going try to get an upgrade at wide receiver. I mean, going over and looking at what you have at the receiver position, you could possibly try to package Ladd McConkey coming off a monstrous performance. So if you could go from like Ladd McConkey and Alexander Mattison to a team that desperately needs a running back and go out there and pick up a player like Marvin Harrison Jr. that maybe just a little bit of a better wide receiver projection rest of season, I think that could make a lot of sense for you to go ahead and upgrade that wide receiver slot. I mean, of course, with that being said, going over to wide receiver, we're just absolutely loaded, right? I mean, we are sitting with the combo of A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, both of whom top 10 wide receivers rest of season, especially if you have the Stephon Diggs injury making Nico Collins that much more appealing. And at the same time, you're looking at Garrett Wilson as your wide receiver 3. I'd be happy with Wilson as my wide receiver 2, personally. Beyond that, we have T. Higgins coming back in. We have Ladd McConkey with the breakouts. For me, I'd say there's not really the upside with Demario Douglas in this offense. It's a bad Pats offense, while at the same time, they are spreading the ball out to so many different receivers. You are getting a bunch of different receivers running routes, playing snaps. I think if you wanted to go through and if you wanted to potentially try to, I don't even know, try to do anything, just cut Demario Douglas and pick up Tyrone Tracy to see what happens in tonight's game. I think that could be an interesting move. Tracy obviously in a bad offense as well, but I think Tracy could potentially be taking over as the starting running back here for the Giants. So I would cut Douglas. I'd pick up Tracy. Obviously, there are great tight ends out there on the waiver wire with, say, Tucker Kraft sitting there for free. The issue is tight end, we're chilling. We have Evan Ingram, and we have Dalton Kincaid. Evan Ingram looks like he's about to be even better with the injuries to the receivers that you have in Jacksonville. So fundamentally, there aren't too many moves that this team can look to make. I think you're already in a phenomenal situation. Really, the only thing that I would try to do is, if possible, if you could go ahead and look to make that 2-for-1 deal where we sell off some of the running back production that we don't need ourselves, such as Alexander Madison, with a wide receiver to go get that wide receiver upgrade, and make the pivot off the waiver wire where you move on from Demario Douglas and pick up Tyrone Tracy. I think that would be an interesting move that we could make as well. But obviously, much easier said than done. It's a great team. We're currently 5-2. And at the same time, we have the second highest graded team in the league analyzer. So there's not a ton that you could do here. But I really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. Thank you for taking advantage of that free Underdog offer. And really hope I get to see you out in a live stream sometime soon. Now, coming out with our next question, this is going to be Evan here, where we are trading Sutton and Hopkins for Olave. This is an absolute no-brainer. I know people were upset with us for not having Courtland Sutton as a top 40 receiver in our rest of season rankings in the video this week. Courtland Sutton's currently wide receiver 50 from a points per game perspective. Yes, you get a great game and a great matchup, but realistically speaking, I don't know how excited you can be about Sutton going into the future. Olave just comes through and you get all the volume in New Orleans. Every Saints player is dropping like a fly, and you're going to get Derek Carr back in. So I think this is probably the easiest buy low call that you could have all season here with Olave. And I think you're paying a great price to get him as well. Now, Chase Hobson coming out with our next trade question. This is Jefferson Kupp versus Breece Adams Nico. So going from Kupp to Nico, I probably prefer Nico Collins rest of season with the Stephon Diggs injury. Obviously, you're going to get an extra 2 games out of Kupp, though, so that is something to point out. Going from Jefferson to Breece and Adams, I think it's a very fair deal here. If I was in a situation in which I could afford to wait for Nico Collins and put up with the bye weeks that you have going into the future, I'm going to go with the Breece, Adams, and Nico side. Keep in mind, though, if you have a losing record, you're going to have another week of Nico on the IR. And at the same time, the Jets and Texans have yet to go through their bye week. So you're going to get 2 extra games played for Jefferson and Kupp. Now, Admiralcollin coming out. Appreciate you, my friend. Says, I think I need to leverage 2 of my receivers to get a better one, but not sure who or how. Really love your content and actually genuinely enjoy Underdog Fantasy because of your recommendation. I really do appreciate you, my guy. And, oh, yeah, 100%. I stand by Underdog. I mean, there's a reason that the only thing that y'all will ever hear me promote on this channel, there are only two things, if y'all haven't noticed this. One, flockfantasy.com, because I'm trying to make as many cool tools for y'all as I possibly can. And two, Underdog Fantasy, because I freaking love it. They've been the sponsor for 4 years for a reason. And there's a reason we're not going out here and making promotions for like Manscaped, right? Like, I'm not going to try to sell you a razor. I'm only going to try to go through and show off things that I genuinely really like myself. But anyway, super happy to hear that you're liking it. I love it too, especially the drafts in the offseason. But anyway, checking this out. Team name is Jalen Hurts My Wallet. This is a 12-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. We are currently the second team in the league analyzer, but we are right here with team number 1. So it is neck and neck. I mean, there's not a big gap between us. We were 4-3 coming into the week, and there are actually some really strong options on the waiver wire, where if you're looking at what we have on waivers, you could potentially go out there and pick up Rico Dowdle, who I still think that Dowdle is the starting running back in this offense going into the future. I don't think Dalvin or Zeke showed enough to take that job from him. You could go ahead and pick up Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley's in a garbage offense, but he's just going to get absolutely every single target without Hopkins here. So you are in a situation in which you could kind of go through and look to just make waiver wire pivots. Like for me, I understand wanting to potentially roll with Tillman after the 2 blow-up games with Jameis under center. But taking a step backwards and looking at the larger sample, I personally would still prefer Calvin Ridley over Tillman. Going and looking at running back, now with the usage that you have from Chase Brown, I think I would possibly prefer Rico Dowdle over Zach Moss. But we'll get to that later. So going over to quarterback, we are currently sitting with Burrow and Purdy. Burrow is a quarterback in which we can start him pretty much every single week, regardless of the matchup. Obviously, looking at Joe Burrow, you don't have the rushing upside that you get from some of the other elite quarterbacks. So in my mind, he's not like a top 4 option, but still a very comfortable play that you could go with. Going over to what we have with Purdy. Purdy's in an awkward spot in that I'm probably never playing him over Burrow, but at the same time, he doesn't have enough value where you can't really trade him for anything. So it's hard for me to go out and say, oh yeah, let's go through and we don't need Brock Purdy. Let's trade him and Bucky Irving. Let's go get a great running back. It's like, realistically speaking, it's just much, much easier said than done. Going over to what we have at RB, you're currently looking at Bijan and Jonathan Taylor. With Bijan Robinson and Taylor, in my mind, they're both very easy RB1s rest of season. I don't have much hesitation in saying that either. Bucky Irving, strong RB3 here. I think you could pick up Rico Dowdle, have the running back production at the very top, as well as the depth at RB. So I think you're in a very comfortable position now that Jonathan Taylor is back in, especially if they pivot off of Anthony Richardson and instead roll with Flacco. Obviously, that makes Taylor that much more appealing. And then going over to what you're going to get at wide receiver. We have the elite wide receiver 1 with Lamb. I think that Olave is a very strong wide receiver 2 once Carr comes back this next week. Hopkins, wide receiver 3, should expand the role in KC. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 4, looks to be breaking out. It's a league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, so it's not like the wide receiver depth here matters a ton. Jacoby Myers, Cedric Tillman. Again, I understand that Tillman gives you the back-to-back monsters performances, but you also get the big game from Ridley. We've seen through Ridley's career him be an effective option. I think the Titans offense could also get better if we have Will Levis come back in. So for me, I probably myself pivot off of Cedric Tillman. You know what? You can keep Tillman if you want. I'm not going to tell anybody to cut Tillman and then all of a sudden have the Tillman fanboys coming after my neck. But when you have these great options on the way, you know what? I cut them anyway. I cut Schultz, I cut Tillman, I pick up Ridley and Rome. I cut Moss, I pick up Dowdle. That's what I do. Tight end, we have Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram looks to be just an absolute must-start option every single week post wide receiver injuries that we have. Schultz looks exciting, of course, post Stephon Diggs injury, but realistically speaking, I just don't see how you ever play him over Evan Ingram with the volume that we've had from Ingram. You haven't had a single double-digit performance from Schultz yet. I know Evan Ingram has the bye week in week 12, but I think by the time we get to week 12, we can just go ahead and we can look to pick up somebody at that time. I think it's a great team. I mean, if you could go through, if you could sell a wide receiver depth piece like Ladd McConkey, maybe with Joe Burrow to get to a true elite level quarterback like Lamar is going to run the ball, I think that does make sense. It's definitely not something that you need to do, just something that you could consider. Where we are this strong in the wide receiver depth, so easy to come by off the waiver wire that you have guys like Ridley and Dowdle sitting out there for free. And if you were able to make that 2-for-1 pivot up to the elite quarterback like Lamar, Hurts, or Daniels, then at that point as well, you can maybe open up a roster spot with that 2-for-1 deal. You could open up an additional roster spot by not even wanting to roster the backup quarterback. But overall, it's a great team. I'm grasping for straws. It's the second best team in the league analyzer, right? So I don't think that there's too much you have to do. But again, thank you for being a member of the flock. I really hope I was able to help you out with this. I hope you're able to get something from this. Now, let's move this over to our next question. It's coming out from Dawson P., longtime member of the flock. Appreciate you, my guy. Let me go ahead and hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start sit question too. Says, my team's playing phenomenally and you have helped me a lot. I'm 5-2, about to be 6-2. The only thing that is holding me back from a Super Bowl squad is we are not great at quarterback. I'm not confident in Dak and I feel like I'm weak in the QB room. What should I try to do to upgrade and get more consistency? Thanks for the help, Mason. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you. So this is Obi-Wan Kenobi. We are currently third in the league analyzer. Looking at the league analyzer, the top three teams look like juggernauts. Everybody beyond is absolute garbage. And yeah, in the top three teams, I know you said we're about to be 6-2, but I mean, all coming into this week, we're 5-2. It's a 10-team league in which you only have 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So what this means is there should be phenomenal options out there off the waiver wire, and at the same time, wide receiver depth just simply is not going to matter. Now, going over to what we have a quarterback, 100%, I think that you can afford to go get a better QB here. I mean, right now we're sitting with the combo of Dak Prescott and Drake May. You've had some tough matchups for Dak, but still at the same time, obviously, he has been just absolutely horrific. It's not like Dak is a quarterback that we can confidently come through and say, yeah, this is somebody that we are starting every single week going into the future, regardless of matchup. No, I mean, you are in a situation in which it would suit you very well to potentially go out and pivot over to an elite level quarterback if possible. I mean, you really need to think about what you have here in terms of the composition of the starting lineup requirements here in this league. When it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format, quarterback's going to make up a pretty damn high percentage of your starting lineup output weekly. Whereas if it's a league with a bunch of flex spots, then at that point, quarterback's going to be a little bit less important. So looking at this, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that we wanted to go through and we want to potentially try to upgrade over Dak. Going over to what we have at running back, we just have so many viable RBs here, right? I mean, both Mixon and Gibbs, locked and loaded top 10 RBs rest of season, no hesitation. Start them every week, regardless of the matchup. Obviously, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. I would prioritize building around running back depth in comparison to wide receiver depth. With that being said, we have plenty of running back help. I mean, we have Bucky Irving, who's in that effectively 50-50 split with Rashad White at this point. We have Dowdle, who I still believe is probably the starting running back here in Dallas. We have Kareem Hunt, who's an absolute crusher in the short term with the Pacheco injury. Dameon Pierce, just a handcuff back. My thing with Pierce, I know we have Mixon, but even if Mixon were to get injured, Pierce is still not going to have the third down role in this offense. So I think for me, I personally would look to possibly pivot over to a different option there at running back. And you do have the Trey McBride bye week coming up soon. So maybe something that you could potentially think about is going through and cutting Dameon Pierce and picking up either Cade Otton or Kyle Pitts off the waiver wire. I know we don't particularly need a second tight end because we are just extremely strong with Trey McBride, but McBride hasn't gone through his bye, and at the same time, these aren't just regular waiver wire tight ends. I mean, Cade Otton and Kyle Pitts look, and Sam Laporta here as well. Really, whoever you want to roll with. These are phenomenal options rest of season. So I think personally, I would cut Pierce. I'd pick up the backup tight end. I would probably also cut Drake May. In terms of who else you could pick up, I'd rather have Darnold. I'd rather have Cousins at quarterback. I would probably rather have Alexander Madison at RB. So maybe instead you just drop Drake May. You pick up your favorite tight end out of that list. You drop Dameon Pierce. You pick up Alexander Madison, who, well, yeah, he's in a bad offense. He is getting the guaranteed workload every single week. You have both the usage as a receiver as well as the usage at the goal line. So, I mean, he is somebody that you could start if we ever really needed to. Probably don't need to, though. So I'd make those 2 waiver wire pivots. Going over to what we have at receiver, you're currently sitting with Jamar Chase and Nico Collins. So rest of season, 2 wide receiver ones here with very little hesitation, of course. We have DJ Moore, viable flex play. Obviously, we had him as a sell-high candidate a few weeks back. But at the same time, if you are going into the future, I think it's going to be very difficult to sell DJ Moore now coming off of the very poor performances. I mean, people were screaming at me that I ranked DJ Moore too high when I ranked him as a wide receiver 3 in the rest of season rankings. When it screamed at me when we said to sell him high a few weeks ago. But anyway, Jalen McMillan here, Demario Douglas. Wide receivers, maybe a little bit tough in the short term. Long term, I think you're going to be fine. For me, I see more upside with the Niners offense. So I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to pivot over from Demario Douglas, say, to Ricky Pearsall. I think that would be something that I would like to do. Going over to tight end, we have McBride. Obviously, McBride, elite tight end. But when you have these phenomenal options out there on the waiver wire, you know what I think you could look to do, to be honest? If you could potentially look to sell Trey McBride and Dak Prescott to go get to a quarterback that you'd be excited about, I think it'd be a no-brainer. Obviously, McBride looks like a top 3 tight end rest of season. McBride looks phenomenal. But, I mean, with that being said, like, actually, no, this is the issue with this league. This is a league where you don't have to start a tight end. Never mind, ignore everything I just said. We're not picking up the tight ends off the waiver wire. Going through and looking at some of the other rosters in this league, they're not even rostering tight ends, some of these teams. So I'm assuming you don't need to start a tight end. That means you're not going to be able to you're not even going to be able to trade Trey McBride for anything. So I still make the move where we drop Dameon Pierce and we pick up Alexander Madison. I drop Drake May and pick up Sam Darnold or Kirk Cousins, your call. If we get another spike week from DJ Moore, and then at that point, you're able to potentially go through and sell DJ Moore and Dak Prescott and go get to a quarterback that we're very excited to start every single week, it's for sure something that we are wanting to do. But definitely not something that we are needing to. But yeah, the issue is you just don't have another wide receiver piece that people are going to be excited to trade for at the moment. And we actually probably need to hold on to DJ Moore for another week as we wait for Nico Collins to return. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. I did hook you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question as well. So if there's anything else that you have regarding this team, and if you want to send it my way, I'd be super happy to go ahead and check that out for you. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock for so long. Really appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out in the stream soon. Now, Mavium coming out with a massive start sit donor. I appreciate you. Let me hook you up with a free start sit question. That way, later in the week, you can ask another start sit just in case anything changes with injuries. Here as things stand for this week. To be completely honest with you, I've not even memorized the matchups for week 9 yet. Let me go ahead and let me pull this up. Obviously, we already have Taylor locked and loaded here. Seattle goes up against the Rams. I think you go ahead and you play Kenneth Walker. Hope Metcalf's good to go, so the offense a little bit better. The wide receiver plan for now is going to be going with Cup as well as Malik Neighbors. Neighbors gets the Giants. Neighbors gets the Commanders. Cup gets the Seahawks. Going over to tight end, plan will be to go with Laporta. And then down in the flex, we are probably going to be going with Jacobs. I could see the pivot to Connor, however, of course, if we were to have no love. Now, I did hook you up with that free start sit question, so you can send in another one later this week. Just when we have a little bit more injury news and we have the ability to dive into the matchups and projections a little bit more, and we'll see if the answers change at all at that point. But let's move this over to our next question. This one coming out from Jay Fletch. This is going to be a full-blown team review. Here's one of those free Underdog team reviews. Says, what do you think about my team? I feel like we have good enough depth, but maybe too much. Could use some advice. Not the best start, but I feel like I'm on the come up. So this is labeled as Dynasty. This should be a Dynasty league with the amount of roster spots that we have. It is a Superflex 10-team start 9 Dynasty format. So a couple different things where you make the adjustments in this league. In a 10-team Superflex league, depth at the quarterback position will be very easy to come by. Now, with that being said, obviously it doesn't mean that we don't value the elite level quarterbacks. No, of course we're willing to pay up for the guys like Daniels, Lamar, Allen. But it does mean that the quarterback depth pieces such as like Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, maybe in a 12-team Superflex league, those guys could command some value because it's hard to find a starter there as your QB3 based off the supply and demand. Here in a 10-team format, everybody on average is going to be able to roster 3 to 4 starting quarterbacks. So the depth of the quarterback position, not going to matter too much. We are currently 5th in the league analyzer. Going down looking at this, we are 2-5. So this is a dynasty format. So with that being said, I'm sorry, but it is time to burn it down. Even if we won this week and you're 3-5, I think looking at this roster, especially with the Stephon Diggs injury here, it's going to be extremely tough for you to go through and make an argument to try to be a contending team this year. Now, the issue with that is when we go through and when we look at some of these assets, there are players that are very clear sells on a rebuilding roster. somebody like Kirk Cousins at this point would be a very easy player to pivot off of if you were going to be a rebuilding team. I mean, there's almost no path for Cousins to actually increase in value from this point to this offseason. And the assets that we want to accumulate on a rebuilding roster will be pieces that are more valuable in this offseason than they are this week or during the year right now. And I don't think Cousins can increase his value. Obviously, Michael Penix will be somebody that's great to build around for the long term. I think Penix will be worth more in the offseason than he is right now. Dak Prescott, you could say if you could get a nice return for a contending team, you're willing to go out there and move on from him. But it's not like this is a situation in which with Dak, you need to go through and you need to pivot, because I don't know how much value you can reasonably get, and he will still be the starting quarterback for the Cowboys for years to come based off his contract. Now, going over to running back's typically a position that it's very difficult for us to project any player to ever gain in value as time goes on. Now, I think Jonathan Brooks may be a little bit of a different mode here, where Brooks, obviously, this season, it's hard to get excited. But I think Brooks in 2025 will be much better than he is right now. And I think you could actually see Brooks increase his dynasty value. So I would not be looking to sell Jonathan Brooks. I think Brooks definitely is somebody that you look to build around on a rebuilding team. Going over and looking at maybe some of the veteran assets, James Conner 100% is going to be worth less this offseason than he is right now. So you 100% look to pivot off of James Conner. Breece and Bijan are kind of in the gray area where obviously these running backs should have very large roles in 2025. But with that being said, are they going to be worth more this offseason than they are right now? That's something that I think is very difficult to project out. So what I would look to do with like the Breece and Bijan tier running backs is I would throw them on the trade block. And if you could get a phenomenal price tag, I'd be willing to move off of them. But if your league mates are playing hardball, I mean, you can hold on to them to the offseason. Going over to receiver, Rome Odunze, great cornerstone asset that can increase in value going into next year. Jalen Waddle is somebody that I would throw in the same boat as like Bijan, Breece, where his value is probably not going to be more this offseason than it is right now, but you're not getting the guaranteed fall. So I think you can hold on to Waddle even in a rebuilding roster, but I would throw him on the block. If somebody's willing to pay up, we move off of him. I mean, I think with Waddle, you're pretty much just looking to see, can we get a future first in a 10-team super flex dynasty league? Then going over to the veteran receivers like Terry, Kupp, Amari. These are guys that for sure will be worth less this offseason than they are right now. So I would 100% see what we could get. I think it is a no-brainer sell. I mean, obviously you're not expecting a ton in return. But I mean, if you could go through and if you could sell them, I mean, a 2-for-1 deal of Terry McLaurin and Cooper Kupp and go get a future first in a 10-team Dynasty Superflex League where we're looking to rebuild, I think that'd make a lot of sense. And then going over to tight ends, we are completely fine building around Ferguson and Kraft. We don't really have to do much there. But ultimately, obviously, it makes sense on a rebuilding roster for us to want to go through and for us to want to get off of these assets that are going to be declining in value going into next season, pick up assets that are going to be gaining in value, such as J.J. McCarthy, such as future rookie picks, such as maybe rookie receivers that don't have a massive role right now but could be better. And if you're able to get off the veterans that are going to be declining in value, it should also make it where we get a better 2025 first-round pick for ourselves because we're going to be more likely to lose games. So that is what I would be looking to do personally. But yeah, I think on a 2-5 team, especially now that you have the Diggs injury, I don't think you can afford to look to contend. But going over to Cathreg, always out here, says 8-team half PBR single flex. Trying to upgrade at receiver. We have Chase, Diggs, Reed, Worthy. I can potentially trade for Hopkins, Amari, Metcalf, and maybe Adams. Who should we target? Brian Robinson Jr. is up for trade. Okay. 8-team league where you only start one flex spot. The wide receiver depth pieces don't matter at all, literally at all. So if I'm looking at Amari, if I'm looking at Hopkins, I think these receivers that can turn into wide receiver 2s rest of season are very interesting trade targets if you're playing in a 12-team format where depth maybe matters a bit. However, if you're in this format in which I couldn't care less about the depth, even if Amari Cooper comes out and he's the wide receiver 12 rest of season, which is pretty much the absolute ceiling case you have. He's a mid wide receiver 2 here where you don't make a big difference. So if I was to trade for anybody, I'm going after the ceiling play. And honestly, I would probably rather have Brian Robinson Jr. over these receivers. Like, these receivers, frankly, aren't going to move the needle too much in a 8-team league. Now, obviously, when we had the Stephon Diggs injury, it does potentially make sense for you to go out there and for you to pick up an extra receiver. Definitely not something that you need to do, but something that you can do. If I was going after anybody here, I'm probably going to go ahead and go after DK Metcalf. But again, I don't think that chasing wide receiver production in an 8-team league, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex is the move. I think you probably should have some pretty solid players off the waiver wire. And I would almost rather trade like Brian Robinson Jr. and Jaden Reed to go get a tier upgrade and go try to get in a top-end wide receiver 1 here in an 8-team format, rather than just trading a running back on our bench for a wide receiver that will be on our bench. I don't know if it'll really accomplish much, even with the Diggs injury, to be honest. But let me move this over and answer some of the free questions that we have in the live chat. Please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'd be happy to try to get to as many as we possibly can. I don't think we have too many questions on the site, so we should be able to answer a lot of the free chat questions today. Marty says HN and Adams for Taylor, Higgins, and Johnson. Taylor, HN, going to be up to you. Obviously, with Taylor, you have every single touch in your respective backfields. HN, you are splitting with Mostert, but you get the bonus with HN, where you do have the receiving usage that Taylor won't. But I do think that is going to be a lateral move and up to you there for me. Going from Adams to T. Higgins and Deontae Johnson, I think is going to be up to the rest of your roster. And if wide receiver depth is the priority, or just getting the best receiver possible. Mason Benitez says, start Cedric Tillman this week, ? I wonder, can we find a provider that's put out lines so far? So what do y'all think the projections are for this Browns offense? I haven't seen anything for week 9 yet. Obviously, I'm going to be honest with you. Monday, I'm not even close to thinking about start sets. Implied team totals week 9. Is there going to be anything out? There is. Can y'all take a guess on what offense projects to score the most points this week? According to sportsbooks, which I'll reiterate over and over and over again, they know more than you do. They know more than I do. They're a very useful tool to try to project out as accurate as possible what you should expect weekly. What offense do you think sportsbooks are projecting to be the highest scoring? We got Saints, Lions. Everybody's saying Lions. I would have thought so as well, but it's a division game where you're playing the Packers. Let me see if this is true. Is this freaking true? The Chiefs are 9.5-point favorites over the Buccaneers. The Chiefs have an implied team total of 27 points. Let me pull this up because I'd be surprised if the Chiefs were actually 9.5-point favorites. I mean, you can go through and sportsbook to sportsbook. Chiefs anywhere from 8.5 to 9-point favorites. Super interesting. The Chiefs project out that well here against the Bucs. But anyway, the Browns currently project to be the 4th worst offense in the league this week. Going through and looking at this, the Browns are 2.5-point dogs to the Los Angeles Chargers, or 2-point dogs, depending on where you look. The over-under of this game, $42.5. So looking at this site, do they have that wrong? They have it 38.5. Yeah, this site is wrong. So never mind. Ignore the implied team total site. They need to update it tomorrow. But still, you do have the Browns with a relatively low total. Should be a lower scoring game in general. I understand that, yes, you did have just the absolute blow up from Jameis and this Browns offense this past week. And I did not give Cedric Tillman nearly the respect that he deserves. But I do think that you're going to have some serious regression here for Jameis going up against the Chargers. The Chargers are 2.5-point favorites in a game with a low total. I mean, Jameis had one of the best games I can ever remember in his career. Definitely a top 5. I mean, the best game we've seen over the past 5 seasons for Jameis. It was incredible. But you did also have 3 interceptions dropped by the Ravens defense. So, realistically speaking, projecting going into the future, like, can I say Cedric Tillman's a must-start name regardless of your league format and your options? No, for sure not. Like, if I was playing in a 10-team league, there's no way I'm starting Cedric Tillman. Obviously, at 29 points this past week was phenomenal. But, I don't know. Josh is closer to 5 interceptions dropped. I'm trying to be a little reasonable. Let's see. Nick says Deontae Johnson to the Texans. I mean, Diontae to the Texans does make a lot of sense. It just comes down to what's the actual cost of Deontae Johnson. Let's see. Applewell says Terry, Harrison, or Walker in the flex in a full PPR format. I think you have to go Kenneth Walker. Like, I know Kenneth Walker had 1 down week. One thing that I've noticed by reading the comment section probably a little bit too much is people live and die about what happened last week. Whatever happened last week, people act as if that's always going to be the case. I rank Bijan Robinson as a mid RB1. He turns out to be an RB2 that week. People come out and clown on me for having Bijan too high. Bijan Robinson's a high-end RB1. I rank him as a mid RB1. People come out and go, oh my God, how are you not moving him up? It's like, but here with Kenneth Walker, I know it was 1 bad week against the Bills. But if you look at what you've had outside of this, yes, you only get the 8.5 fantasy points this week. But before that, you had the 23, the 20, the 14.5, the 33 fantasy points. Week 1, the 19 fantasy points. Walker has been consistently one of the best options in all of fantasy football. The floor is 8.5 points from what you just saw with them getting blown out against the Bills. Like, Walker is a must-start option. You do not put Terry over him. You do not put Harrison over him. Soyeb says, is Garrett Wilson getting traded? Can someone let me know in the chat? Was there a report with Wilson? I don't see how that makes any sense. Like, realistically speaking, you're the Jets. You go through, you trade away your young receiver on a rookie contract when you're supposed to be rebuilding. And instead you go out there and you trade for the old veteran dude. Trade for the 31-year-old and get rid of your guy on the rookie deal. Obviously, I'm not an NFL general manager, but I don't see why Wilson would get traded. Jonathan says, how do you project Hopkins for rest of season? If you're looking at Hopkins, I think that he should be viewed as that borderline flex play rest of the year. Obviously, this past week, it was absolute garbage, but Chiefs will probably be a pretty good offense. While at the same time, Hopkins could very easily see the majority of targets. I don't think Hopkins is a great talent. I mean, you've seen the efficiency drop for 3 straight seasons now. I mean, if you're including this year, 4 straight seasons. But still, at the same time, the snaps will increase. The routes run will increase. I think it will be a much better situation going in the future. Luke says, imagine if you drafted him in the flock league. So we're going to be sitting here like 6-3 in the flock league. This next week, I go up against the worst team in the league that just lost Diggs. It's pretty much a bye. I'm going to be 6-3, would be 7-2 if it wasn't for a freaking stat correction. And yeah, if I would have drafted Kenneth Walker instead of Terry McLaurin, we were drafting off of vibes. I didn't know Walker was available. What's hilarious is I didn't know Walker was available. I thought the best available running back was David Montgomery, so I took Terry McLaurin instead, thinking I was smart. Would have been hilarious if I just freaking took David Montgomery. I mean, if I took either running back, we would have been crushing. But if I knew Walker was available, I would have taken Walker there. But I knew Montgomery was available, and I passed on him, which I'm an idiot. Let's move this over, and let's get to some more of the questions that we have on the site. We have some more team reviews to get through, a lot of the free Underdog reviews. But I do want to reiterate, of course, if you wanted to ask any questions, you could always go hit the Ask a Question link in the live chat. Or go to flockfantasy.com, hit the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. And here you can go through and you can submit a team review, trade question, start sit question, or a super message, whatever you are wanting. If you wanted that team review, I'd highly recommend you take advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a free 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you are going to be getting a free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight. That's regardless of if you use code FLOCK last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, yesterday, today, or tomorrow. And on top of that, you would also be getting a free Russell Wilson pick, more than less than half a total yard with code FLOCK if you're new to Underdog, and a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. So make sure that you take advantage of that if you have not done so already. You can find that link in the live chat that says either free Malik Neighbors pick or free team review. It's the same thing. Just if you wanted that free team review, make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy, so I can go ahead and I hook you up with that free team review voucher. But let's move this over to Nate's team. This is one of those free team reviews. Says, hey Mason, been watching for a few years. Only trust your judgment. My starting lineup feels great, but I don't have much depth. Any suggestions on some trades, or should we stay put? Really appreciate you and going to be excited to check this out, my guy. Here, this is to Infinity and Bijan. We are the #1 team in the league analyzer. There's one other team that's very close to us, but outside of that, the rest of the league is a sharp fall off. For whatever reason, we are sitting here with a pretty bad record. I'm assuming maybe we had some injuries. Yeah, we had the injury to Tua, which impacted Achane, but honestly, I would have assumed that we were a lot better than this. This is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, 10-team league. So assumption is that the waiver wire is full of really strong options. But actually looking at the waiver wire in this league, it's definitely okay, but I'm not going to sit here and act like it's the best waiver wire I've ever seen. Starting off at quarterback, we are rolling with Kyler and Goff. I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to potentially move off of Jared Goff here and only have Kyler Murray going into the future. I believe Kyler does have the week 11 bye, however, and obviously Goff has already gone through the week 10. So if you wanted to roster 2 quarterbacks, would be fine. But looking at the quarterbacks that are available on the waiver wire, you have guys like Cousins, Tua, Bo Nix, all out there. So definitely not a league in which you need to roster 2 QBs when you have someone like Kyler who gives you the rushing upside. Now going over to running back, it's where things kind of get interesting. Because we have the 2 locked and loaded RB1s rest of season with the combo of Bijan and Achane. At the same time, we have some of these players near the bottom end that are going to be improving as the season goes on, like Jonathan Brooks and Bucky Irving. We have Jordan Mason getting washed out at this point. But overall, it's a running back room where we have a ton of talent at the very top. We have enough depth as well. So it's a really comfortable position here at running back. Going over to receiver, we have 2 locked and loaded wide receiver ones rest of season. We have Brian Thomas Jr. as well. We have Rome Odunze who can get better as the year goes on. We're looking at Ricky Pearsall as the bottom end play. So the report that we got today was saying that Ricky Pearsall is going to see Juwan Jennings good to go in week 10, as well as Deebo Samuel will be good to go in week 10 as well. So with the bye week that you have from Sticky Ricky, I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to potentially move off of him and go pick up a waiver wire option like Braylon Allen, just in case Breeks goes down and we can find the next Jordan Mason. Miles says trade Mason and Bucky Irving to the CMC owner for something. So obviously we had Jordan Mason as a sell high candidate, but to be honest with you, I don't see how I could tell somebody to sell Jordan Mason now. Just because realistically speaking, post shoulder injury, where Isaac Grindo shows out this past week. If I said to go sell Jordan Mason, realistically, who's going to be buying? I don't think the CMC owner buys Jordan Mason, especially, with Mason himself injured. It would have been nice if we could have sold Jordan Mason last week, but now I think that we have missed the boat here. This is a great team. I'm sure we have the Brian Thomas Jr. injury. We have the Jordan Mason injury. We have the Jonathan Brooks injury. We have the elite tight end with Bowers. The injuries may make it a little bit tougher for us to go through and make many moves. Obviously, if you could sell Jordan Mason, we would. I'm just going to assume that we have nobody in our league that would be interested in buying. Realistically speaking, I think the only real conversation that we can have here is, would we prioritize in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, 10-team league some of these depth options that may end up looking replaceable off the waiver wire, such as like Jared Goff and Ricky Pearsall? Or would we prioritize the running backs that are an injury away from seeing a pretty big role, such as Braylon Allen and Jalen Warren? I think if you could maybe go through and sell like Bucky Irving and Kyler Murray to pivot over to one of the top 4 quarterbacks that are going to be a little bit more consistent with their rushing upside, I would look to do that. But it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league where we don't have much depth at receiver. And I think the guys we have will probably get better as the season goes on, so we don't necessarily need to sell them. So realistically speaking, I don't see how we could do much with this roster. I think you have a great team. I think that you're incredibly unlucky to be 3-4. I think it's going to be much better going into the future here. We have the number 1 team in the league analyzer. I think the only thing you could do is if you can find somebody to buy one of our depth running backs with Kyler Murray in a deal and pivot over to a top 4 QB in a 10-team league where you only start 2 receivers in a flex, I would look to do just that. And then you could potentially go out there and look to pick up these guys like Braylon Allen, Jalen Warren. That could be premium handcuff plays, and an injury turns them into an every week starter, even in this format. I think really that's the only thing you can do, but you have a phenomenal team. I think we're kind of just rolling as is, but I appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Now, Pickles coming out with a free team review says, streaming quarterback's been holding CMC and Cup all season. I'm now 3-5 and in a 3-way tie for last. So team name here is Trump. We are right in the middle of the league analyzer. It looks like this is a very even league in general. Which is kind of surprising. Now, this is an 8-team league, so the options on the waiver wire should be incredible. We've been streaming QB. I would say that you're probably in a spot where it makes sense in an 8-team format where it's easy to find depth at wide receiver. It's easy to find depth at running back for us to go out there and just improve at the quarterback position and go trade for somebody that is an every week starter. I would imagine we could find a team in your league that's kind of rostering a couple of the top end quarterbacks. Like this team has Allen and Joe Burrow. I mean, if we could try to swing a trade for Josh Allen, I think that'd make a ton of sense. This team down here is Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love. Obviously, it may be tough to trade for Hurts now with the Love injury. This team here's sitting with Lamar, but obviously they don't. I think really the trade would possibly be for Josh Allen. Looking at what this roster could potentially use, they did have the injury to Isaiah Pacheco, so maybe, just maybe, you could look to give them some running back production to get in that upgrade at quarterback. Because right now at running back, I mean, you're in a very comfortable situation, right? I mean, where we are sitting with the best running back room in this league, according to the league analyzer. We have Kyren Williams, who's that elite anchor rest of season. We have McCaffrey, who I would say if you would have fallen to this losing record a couple weeks back, I probably would have looked to sell McCaffrey. That way we could have stayed in the mix. But now that we are this close to McCaffrey returning, where you just pretty much have to wait through the bye week, I think we probably just go ahead and hold on to McCaffrey, and we're not wanting to make a pivot. Looking at what we have with J.K. Dobbins, with Dobbins, you're able to start him every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. You have 3-down workload. I think Kareem Hunt would be a very easy sell for you. I mean, if you could potentially go ahead and package up and get an upgrade elsewhere by sending Kareem Hunt in another piece. And to be honest with you, I don't really like our team in an 8-team league in particular. Like if you could sell Hunt and Marvin Harrison Jr. with Harrison coming off the massive performance. Like I said, I had Harrison as a buy low receiver a couple weeks ago. It's not that I don't like Harrison. It's just specifically on a team where you're currently sitting here at 2-5, where we need to be optimizing for production in the starting lineup right this second rather than upside for the long term. I think it could potentially make sense for us to go through and use that package of Hunt and Harrison to go try to find an upgrade elsewhere there at receiver where we don't particularly need the running back depth. Looking at the running backs that are available to you on the waiver wire, I personally think that we chase the ceiling rather than the floor in an 8-team league. So I would personally drop Mostert and I would drop Dowdle, and I'd pick up the combo of Jonathan Brooks and Bucky Irving. Going over to wide receiver, I think I'd possibly drop Juwan Jennings for Darnell Mooney as well. If you made that 2-for-1 deal to go upgrade that wide receiver or go upgrade that QB, then at that point, obviously you're not having to drop anybody. You can just pick up Darnell Mooney for free. I'm going over to tight end. Cade Otton is a great tight end in a 12-team format. In an 8-team league, it's kind of whatever. So obviously it makes a lot of sense anytime you get the ability to go through and make a 2-for-1 deal in an 8-team league to get an improvement inside the starting lineup. That is something that we are looking to do. I think that this team's no exception. If you're tired of streaming quarterbacks, I would like in an 8-team format for us to potentially go get that upgrade at QB. I think you can have the best shot of doing that by going through and selling a running back. Even if you want to sell Dobbins and Caleb and see if we can go get to a quarterback that you're excited to start every single week, especially from those teams that have 2 viable QBs. We could be looking to do that. And then obviously those additional waiver wire pivots, but I'm sorry, in an 8-team league, it is hard to make moves just because every team is so damn strong, right? Like there are really not too many needs, but I think you could go and just look for that upgrade at the quarterback position, knowing that it's an 8-team league. And again, in an 8-team format, it should be very easy for you to go out there and for you to find talented options at pretty much both running back and receiver without hesitation. And the only thing that may be a little bit tough is coming away with the elite onesies, such as the tight end and quarterback position. So I actually prefer optimizing for tight end and QB in that 8-team format in comparison to what I would in a 12-teamer. But I really appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock. and taking advantage of that free team review. But Nate coming out says, is this worth it? I'm Debo and Waddle as my flex spots currently. I would go ahead and I probably would pivot to Lamar. I do want to reiterate, obviously, Mahomes was a very exciting start this past week. But the reason for that was it was a really good matchup. I mean, going into the future, I still want to say that Mahomes is probably just a streaming quarterback that you play based off the matchup that he has. If it's a great matchup, we go ahead and jam him in. If it's a bad matchup, probably not worth it. But going from Jacobs to get to Lamar has been the number one player in fantasy football so far this season. It hasn't been remotely close either. I like Jacobs. Again, I do want to reiterate, he's a 3-down running back in a very good offense. But Lamar Jackson's just a completely different tier. I think you go ahead and I think you get Lamar. Now, let me move things around. If you have any questions, please go down to the chat and drop as many questions as you got so we can go ahead and break them down for you. David says, Najee and Chubb for Aaron Jones. Yes, you for sure go for Aaron Jones if you're playing in a full PPR format. He's in the best offense out of them, and at the same time, he has the receiving usage. Dustin says, is Wicks worth a streaming option anymore? Definitely not if Jordan Love misses any time. But again, I do want to reiterate the issue that you always have with these Packers receivers, that they're just going to be spreading the ball out to so many different players that when you have arguably the deepest wide receiver room in the league, it's not a really easy spot to say anybody is. Super exciting. But let's move this back over. Again, we are going to take the Lamar side of this. Now, going over to this team, this is Jesus in the Ghetto says, I won the Super Bowl last year with an Adams Lamb Amari combo with Fields at quarterback. Do you think we will repeat? Well, congrats on winning last year. My God, looking at this, this is a Yahoo league, or no, I'm sorry, this is an ESPN league. So you should be able to link this with the site. If you're having any issues linking your team with flockfantasy.com, just go ahead and send those in the site issues section of the Discord, and one of the developers would be really happy to go ahead and help you out. But this is an ESPN format where we are going to be going through. We're going to be starting 2 receivers and a single flex. So wide receiver depth, not going to be a super big priority. Love having the elite quarterback here. Love having the elite tight end here, and love building around running back depth. That's what we want to look at. Now, starting off at quarterback, we are currently looking at Josh Allen. So absolutely love to see it. We have Bo Nix down on the bench as well. It's not inherently a spot in which you need to get rid of Nix and you only have to roll with one quarterback, because obviously Allen does have the bye week in week 12. So if you wanted to hold on to Bo Nix for the week 12 bye for Josh Allen, I'm not going to fault you for it. For me personally, I think if I have the elite level quarterback, though, I'd probably prioritize just rostering a high upside running back down there on the bench. Now, going over to what we have at RB, I mean, this is just a freaking nutso team. Here we have 2 top 10 running backs rest of season. We can say that with relative ease with the combo of Bijan as well as Kenneth Walker. Going down to the depth on the bench, we have Jonathan Brooks potentially getting better in the long term here. We have Raheem Mostert. We don't have a lot of running back depth on the bench. Maybe that's going to be something we really do want to prioritize changing. Just going and looking at the bench in particular, there are a handful of players that I can pretty confidently say that I'm willing to go ahead and drop. Like, I think Allen Lazard is a very easy drop now that you have Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson, making it where Lazard's at best the second option in this offense. So I would drop Lazard, and at the same time, I think that there's no real reason for us to be rostering 3 tight ends here. I think that you figure out who your favorite tight end is behind Brock Bowers. You go ahead and you drop the other guy. So if you wanted to roll with a Zach Ertz for the bye week, if you wanted to roll with Cole Kmet for the Bowers bye week, you do that, but you don't roster both. So drop Lazard, drop the third tight ends. And if you wanted to Look for some high upside running backs off the waiver wire. Guys like Braylon Allen, Jalen Warren, where if injury were to occur in front of them, they pretty much are must-start options. I think that's what I'd be looking to do. Going over to receiver, we have Neighbors, we have Garrett Wilson, we have DJ Moore. So this is a very solid wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 combo. Obviously, looking at both Malik Neighbors as well as Garrett Wilson, neither one of these players have made it through their bye week, so you could make an argument in which you do need to have some wide receiver depth on the bench, but we have Brian Thomas Jr. Latest report that we've had with Thomas is that he is labeled as day-to-day. So it's a phenomenal wide receiver room, both at the very top as well as the depth that you have here. Going over to tight end, we have the elite name with Bowers. I think that this is a phenomenal team. I think that this team very easily should be the favorite to repeat. I don't necessarily think that you need to go through and make any move. But what I would look to do is I would look to drop Allen Lazard. I would look to drop one of our backup tight ends, pick up 2 additional running back depth pieces. And then once we go through Josh Allen's bye, I probably go ahead and I probably drop the backup quarterback as well and only roll with Allen. You don't have to do that right now, though, of course, because we are waiting for the Allen bye. But I appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. Obviously, just absolutely phenomenal team here. Now, going over to our next question. This is another free Underdog team review coming out from Neonist. Says, hey, Mason, I really wanted to flex with my other stack team, but need your help with this one. Currently, somehow 6-9. I like it. I wanted to flex with my stack team, so I'm just going to show you a 6-1 team instead. I guess we are crushing this season if this is our bad team. I've tried doing 2-for-1 deals to get Nico, Cup, or Harrison, but the owners are being stubborn. Your videos are amazing for listening while driving to work. Really appreciate you, my guy. And yeah, I mean, for myself, I am constantly tuned in to YouTube and just pretty much any time I'm working, I have a YouTube video going, but really appreciate you. I'm going to be excited to check this out. So looking at this team in the League Analyzer, we are currently 4th. There's that one juggernaut team at the top that has Lamar, Henry, Mixon, Lamb. I mean, this team's going to be tough to compete with. But, I mean, we're sitting at 6-1 going into this week. This is a 10-team league in which you only start 2 wide receivers in a flex. So, with this being said, you're in a situation in which wide receiver depth doesn't matter. Like you discussed, going through and making 2-for-1 deals will be ideal. While at the same time, having an elite quarterback and having an elite tight end matters just a little bit more than it would in a deeper league in terms of the starting lineup requirements. Now, going over to what we have currently at quarterback, we are rolling out with Josh Allen. Allen, quarterback we can start every single week, obviously as the bye week in week 12, but still at the same time, not necessarily a situation in which you need to go through and you need to roster a backup quarterback when we get to the week 12 bye. Then at that point, we can just go ahead and we can go to the waiver wire and pick up whoever we like the matchup between with guys like Darnold, Goff, Tua, Nix. Going over to what we have at running back. I mean, you are currently sitting with Jahmyr Gibbs, locked and loaded RB1 rest of season. James Cook, possible RB1, but at very minimum, locked and loaded RB2. We have Brooks Pacheco for the long-term upside on a team that was 6-1 coming into this week. We have Bucky Irving improving his role in Tampa. We have Tracy as a quality running back depth piece. So a team with a ridiculous amount of running back depth. One thing that I would consider doing just with how strong this roster is if you potentially wanted to go ahead and look to move off of one of the depth RBs, preferably somebody that's producing right now. Obviously, kind of want to hold the guys that are going to continue to get better as the season goes on. But if you wanted to potentially move off of somebody like Bucky Irving or somebody like Tyron Tracy, depending on what Tracy ends up doing here, make that 2-for-1 deal where we pivot over to an elite tight end by selling high on Kyle Pitts. For me, I think that is something that you could reasonably look to do. Going over to wide receiver, you're currently sitting with Malik Neighbors. Obviously, Neighbors looks to be a wide receiver 1 rest of season. Smith, Waddle, extremely strong wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 combos. Again, in this format, the wide receiver depth isn't going to be super, super important. We have JSN, Josh Downs as depth pieces. So, I mean, similar to what we were saying with the running back position, where if you were able to go through and if you were able to take like Bucky Irving and Kyle Pitts to go get to a true elite level tight ends, somebody like Bowers or McBride that we have seen the more consistent volume from, I think I would look to do that. But also, I think you could do the same thing at wide receiver. I don't want to say that like Pitts is a clear sell-high candidate for every team in every league formats, but here specifically for yours, where you're just so damn strong at running back and wide receiver, I do still view Pitts as a tier down from what you have with some of the other top guys at the tight end position. Like going through and looking at this team's rolling with Kittle and Laporta. I mean, right now they could use some help at wide receiver. Their wide receiver 1 is Chris Olave. Where, I mean, if you could potentially send them, say, the combo of like Jalen Waddle and Kyle Pitts or Devonta Smith and Kyle Pitts and go get to George Kittle, maybe it seems like we are overpaying a bit, but fundamentally with your league settings here, with your roster in particular, I think it makes sense for us to go out there and quote-unquote overpay for the true elite tight end option. I think that could make a lot of sense. Obviously, they have the McCaffrey injury. You could also try to do the same thing with the running back like Bucky Irving. If they want Jonathan Brooks, give him Jonathan Brooks. I'm just assuming that they'll be more excited about Bucky. But yeah, realistically speaking, I think that's the only move you could make with this team. If you wanted to make an argument, okay, TJ Hawkinson could pop this next week, and he maybe has more upside than someone like Tracy or Algier, and you wanted to drop one of the running backs and pick up TJ Hawkinson, especially with Pitts not already through his bye week, you could look to do that as well. So that's the main thing that I would look to do, my friend. That's the main thing I would look to do. Now, moving over to our next question. This is another free team review. It says, hey, Mason, this week I'm falling to 3-5. And I just traded James Conner and Bucky Irving for Deebo Samuel. What moves should we look to make next? Okay, appreciate you. One thing is, you should go ahead and link your team with the site, my friend. If you're having an issue, send it in the site issue section of the Discord. But should be very easy to link any ESPN teams with the sites. But that way you can see the best waiver wire options. That way you can go through, and that way you can look to see how you stack up in the league's power rankings, what position maybe we need to go after. So starting off at quarterback, we have Jordan Love. Obviously, Love, you don't have the rushing upside, but when he is healthy, still somebody that you can play pretty much every single week because he could go out there and potentially lead the NFL in passing yards, passing touchdowns any week that he steps on to the field. So I'm fine with Love. Don't view him as like the elite quarterback in fantasy football. Going down to the bench, we don't have another QB, so obviously we're going to have to go through. We're going to have to pick up another quarterback right this second. I would look at one of those streamers. Somebody like Bo Nix is a good matchup this week going up against Baltimore. Going over to the running back position, this is a team in which you said we just traded away James Conner and who else did we move? And Bucky Irving for Deebo Samuel. I am completely fine with it, just knowing that you're in a spot in which Deebo Samuel obviously is incredibly compelling with the Brandon Ayuk injury. The backfill depth we have at RB, we're starting Derrick Henry, Javonte, Rico Dowdle, Bucky Irving. We have Jonathan Brooks and CMC coming back in. Okay, so we're going to be rolling out with CMC and Derrick Henry. We are completely fine. I mean, 100% what you want to make with this team is 2-for-1 deals to just go out there and try to get studs inside the starting lineup. So, I mean, another 2-for-1 deal with that in mind and with how strong this team is with the depth, I mean, if you could presumably go out there and make a 2-for-1 deal to upgrade over Jordan Love, I would be really interested in that. Where if you are looking at Love, if you're looking at like Lamar, Daniels, Hurts in comparison to Love, in a 4-point passing touchdown format, it's going to be so difficult for Love to ever compete with those options without the usage as a receiver. As a rusher. So I'd like to make that pivot by, maybe selling a depth receiver here. Like a wide receiver, we have Amari, Reed, Debo, Devontae Adams. And then down there on the bench, you're looking at, say, a DeAndre Hopkins, a Deontae Johnson, Jalen Waddle, especially if Diontae gets dealt to a really good situation. Maybe Diontae gets dealt to Tampa and everybody's over the moon about it. Then at that point, you could look to make a pivot there. Another thing that we could do is, obviously at tight ends, we are in an incredible situation where you're able to go through, you are able to start Travis Kelce every single week, regardless of the matchup. We have Evan Ingram as well, who looks very compelling post Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas Jr. injury. So if you wanted to see if we could trade one of the tight ends and get a true elite level option at quarterback, I think that could make sense. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we could potentially say with this team. This seems phenomenal. Yeah, plenty of depth. I agree with you. We want to be making as many 2-for-1 deals as possible. I think the Deebo Samuel trade makes a lot of sense looking at the roster that we have. I think the other potential trade that you make here is when we have all this depth, I would say this regardless of the Jordan Love injury or not, I think it makes sense for us to potentially try to go out there and get the elite level quarterback if possible. Now, again, much easier said than done, especially now that you do have Jordan Love injured. So if you're going through and selling him, whoever's going to be buying is probably going to be a little bit less interested. But for me, I think that is what I would be looking to do. But I really appreciate you. Really hope I was able to help you out in some way. And obviously, phenomenal team. And we want to continue to make 2-for-1 trades. Now, Dysentery Gary coming out with a trade. This is HN versus DeAndre Swift and Brian Thomas Jr. With the Thomas injury, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to take HN. It looks very easy to just project out Devon HN to be an RB1 here rest of season with the receiving usage and what should be a very strong offense now. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take HN. Now, Parrish coming out with our next question. It's a trade question. We're sending Montgomery Chuba for Breece Hall. I would go ahead. I'd pivot to Breece under the assumption that this is a full PPR format. Obviously, if it was a non-PPR league, then maybe you go ahead and you reevaluate just a bit. But in a full PPR league where we assume that Breece is going to consistently see 4 more targets than David Montgomery, I think you go ahead and I think you take Breece. Okay. Now, let me see. I can do says how to see what my voucher on Flock Fantasy is for. So if you have a voucher on flockfantasy.com, that means more likely than not, you signed up to Underdog Fantasy using code FLOCK. And then that means you should have a free team review attached to your account. Obviously, if you go to your account page on flockfantasy.com and see that voucher. And if you wanted to double check, see if that is what your voucher is for, just go and hit the expert advice button in the top right corner, go through the team review process. And then when you get to that page, it says say $0 for me. But obviously, if y'all wanted to ask any questions on the site, you could always go over to flockfantasy.com. Hit the expert advice button in the top right corner. You can send in a team review, trade question, start sit question, or a super message, whatever you are wanting. If you wanted that team review, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of pretty much the offer that everybody is in this live stream. The free Underdog offer, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy, which the links in the chat, the links in the description, links pretty much everywhere. and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you'll be getting that free Malik Neighbors pick for the game tonight, more than less than half total yard. And on top of that, you'll be getting an additional free pick, a Russell Wilson free one, more than less than half a total yard as well. And you'll get a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I know who to go ahead and hook up that free team review voucher for. So again, make sure that you use promo code FLOCK and Underdog, make a $10 deposit, and set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address if you were wanting that free team review voucher. Okay. Now, let's move this over to our next question. This one's coming out from Drip or Drown. Appreciate you, my guy. This looks like it was a free team review, and he threw on a $5 tip. Much love. Says, hey, Mason, love the channel. I'm at a crossroads here with my team. About to be 4-4. Looking to make the right moves to get into the playoffs. Obvious improvements areas are running back and tight ends. What do you think, considering trying to trade London Brian Thomas Jr. for Kenneth Walker or Amari for Hunt for Otten? Do you have any ideas? Thanks. Thank you so much. Here, I would say going through and trading Amari for one of the tight ends. I don't know if I love the idea of trading Amari Cooper right this second. It does seem like if you're selling Amari Cooper now, you are going to be selling at pretty much the lowest point possible. I think Amari should expand his role here in Buffalo going into the future. I still think that he's probably the wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen. Team name here is Marvin's Room. We are the 3rd team in the league analyzer. So a pretty good spot to be in. It is a league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So the wide receiver depth isn't going to be super important. So I like the idea that we are trying to go through and we are trying to sell that wide receiver depth piece to get the upgrades elsewhere. But the thing is, when we have Kincaid, I don't necessarily know if you really are doing much by selling Amari straight up for Cade Otton. Like, realistically speaking, what's going to be the points per game gap going into the future between Cade Otton and Dalton Kincaid? Now, of course, you can see the rankings. I do prefer Otton over a player like Kincaid. But still, at the same time, it's not like it's the biggest difference in the world here. I'm going over to what we have at quarterback. We are currently sitting with Josh Allen as well as Tua. So if we are looking at Allen, this is a quarterback that you're able to start every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. Now, with that being said, am I going through and am I saying that we need to drop Tua? Probably not, because you have the Allen bye week in week 12. So if you wanted to prepare for that, I'm completely fine. Also, with the fact that it does look like our waiver wire is pretty thin. I mean, at quarterback, you have interesting names like Darnold, Cousins that we'd be able to roll with. But still, at the same time, I mean, you're in a situation in which, I don't know, like, who would we be picking up at receiver? Jerry Jeudy? Are we that excited about it? Going over to what we have at running back. Right now, you are currently sitting with Breece Hall as an elite RB1. I'm super excited about having Hall here, a running back that we can start every single week, regardless of the matchup. I mean, massive role as a receiver. Obviously, we're hoping that we get a little less Braylon Allen going into the future. I mean, it is frustrating seeing the Braylon Allen usage, but still. Going over to what we have at RB2, we had Jordan Mason as a viable play. Now, obviously, when Mason's nothing, we don't know if or when Brooks is coming back. I mean, you could be in a situation in which it makes a lot of sense for you to potentially go through and trade for another running back here. I like the fact that it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format where we don't have a super strong running back. And what we are doing to combat this is we are just rostering as many running backs as we possibly can so we can potentially find the next Jordan Mason. I'll say a very easy player to drop, though, will be Ty Chandler. We already saw Chandler in an environment with no Aaron Jones, and he was extremely inefficient. He's been extremely inefficient all season now, to the point where they go out there and they acquire Cam Akers. So if Aaron Jones were to go down, I think that it's probably a split backfield in Minnesota where it'd be very difficult to project out Chandler as like an easy start. So I think I'd cut Chandler, look at a different running back like Roshan or Isaac Garindo, or maybe even Trey Benson, where if you were to get an injury to James Conner, I think you have a higher ceiling with Benson than you would do with Chandler. Going over to what we have at wide receiver. Currently, you're sitting with London, Brian Thomas Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr., and Amari Cooper. If you have the faith in Amari going into the future, which I personally think Amari is going to be fine, I think you definitely could, if you wanted to, go through and look to move off of a receiver if we can go get somebody like Kenneth Walker. Now, with that being said, I don't think it makes sense for us to go through and make the dramatic changes to the point in which you need to go ahead and you need to trade, say, both Drake London and Brian Thomas Jr. for a running back like Kenneth Walker. But if you could potentially just send London straight up for Kenneth Walker, I think that would make a lot of sense. Amari is a viable depth piece that allows you to get rid of one of the receivers. I don't think you can get rid of both receivers, however. Going over to tight end, we have Kincaid. I don't think Kincaid is where we looked to upgrade this roster from. Like, the last thing I think you need to do is go out there and make a significant upgrade to try to get a better player than Dalton Kincaid at tight end. Like, I think for me, if we were making a pivot, that pivot's going to involve trying to go through and upgrade running back in particular. I think you can afford to trade away a wide receiver for that running back upgrade. If you didn't want to do that, I think you are fine to just roster as many running backs as you possibly can and hope that we're able to find the next Jordan Mason. And with that being said, I don't see Ty Chandler having the handcuff appeal at this point with the Cam Akers edition. So I probably would go ahead. I probably would be looking to drop Chandler and pick up a different running back off the waiver wire, even if that's just somebody like Roshan. But I really appreciate you and really hope that I was able to help you out in some way here. And again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that free team review offer. Now, going over to D. Nickel, this is a trade where we send Pollard and Hawkinson for Lamar Jackson. This is not even remotely close. This is the second trade I've seen someone acquire Lamar Jackson in this live stream at a very reasonable price point. I know the Ravens lose this past week. I know Lamar doesn't have a 40-point performance, but still, Lamar's very much the QB1 in fantasy, kind of in his own tier here. Like, if you can get Lamar at a discount, you go and get Lamar ASAP. Mr. Filthy Wubs, always happy to see you. Here we're going from Chase Brown, Alvin Kamara to Kyron Williams. Looking at the other running back pieces we have Taylor, Jonathan Brooks. Wide receiver, we have Tyreek, Puka, Chase, London. It's an 8-team league. 8-team league, just give me the best player. Give me Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams, better offense, more touches, and at the same time, he's already through his bye week, whereas Kamara isn't. Maybe in a different league, maybe with a different roster. I don't do this, but specifically in this one, I think you can. Now, Sam Glazier coming out says 6-1. We have Amon-Ra, Olave, Reed, Gibbs, and Walker. 6-1. This is an absolute no-brainer to go get Nico Collins. Yeah, you have no Nico Collins this week. Yeah, you have the bye week in week 14. But if you're a 6-1 roster, we're starting to just think about the fantasy football playoffs. We already have plenty of production across the entire starting lineup. It's not like we need to focus in on depth. So yeah, let's go get the best player. Let's just go get Nico Collins here. Now, Browning Mix coming out. This is Swift, Wilson versus Mixon and Diontae. Swift versus Mixon, clear upgrade. Wilson to Diontae, clear downgrade. I think Mixon's by far and away the best player in the deal, however. So I think you can go ahead. I think you can just go pick up Joe Mixon. I mean, Mixon has the 3-down role in a phenomenal offense at this point. Now, Brazy coming out says, asking for a friend. He needs over 5.28 points this week to win. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Tracy. I think that Jalen Warren's in the much better offense, but we have seen that Tracy could potentially be the starting running back here over Devin Singletary. where based off the usage that we've had in Pittsburgh so far this season, I have a very hard time imagining that being the case with Jaylen Warren versus Najee Harris. So I'm going to go ahead. I will take the running back that I believe is going to have the guaranteed touches if you only need 5 points. If you only need 5 points, I think you go with the guy with the higher ceiling. Okay. So the higher floor. Now, Connor's coming out with a free underdog review. Appreciate you. Says, props to you for helping me to get to 6-2. I have a strong team and basically have already made the playoffs. Do you think it's a good idea to trade wide receiver depth for a top tier playoff running back or any other moves you'd like to make with the team? Appreciate the help. Keep crushing it. Appreciate you, my friend. We are right now the second team in the league analyzer. What does this team at 1 look like? This team at 1 is Lamar, Achane, Montgomery, Jacobs, Brian Robinson, Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, Brian Thomas, Brock Bowers. This is going to be a tough team to compete with. Now, with that being said, there are some pretty strong options out there on the waiver wire. If you have a player like Kyler Murray just sitting out there on waivers for free, I definitely would go ahead and look to pick up Kyler if possible. And I think it's very easy to see a couple players I'd look to drop. Like Tyler Goodson is a very easy drop. I think you go pick up Kyler. Obviously, there's no world in which you go through and you start Kyler Murray over Jalen Hurts. But I mean, with that being said, if you get another massive spike from Kyler, you could see a situation in which you're able to sell Kyler for a significant upgrade. If Jalen Hurts were to get injured, it'd be nice to just have Kyler Murray waiting in the wings. Obviously, I'd never say like, oh, yo, trade for Kyler in this circumstance. Like, of course, we're not doing that. But if it's just the free pickup, I'm not gonna complain about just a free pickup off the waiver wire. Now, going over to running back, we're currently sitting with 2 top 10 RBs rest of season. We have Kenneth Walker. We have Jonathan Taylor. Super comfortable spot to be in. We have a couple depth running backs. We have somebody like Rico Dowdle. We have Charbonnet, Jalen Warren, Ray Davis as running backs that are an injury away from making a relatively big difference. Tyler Goodson, you can just 100% let go at this point if we, for whatever reason, still have him on the roster. And like I said, I just go pick up Kyler. Going over to receiver, it's a league in which you can start up to 4 receivers weekly, so the wide receiver depth does matter a little bit more. Now, with that being said, it's not a situation in which we need to go through and we need to just optimize for wide receiver here at the bottom end. We're definitely not doing that. But we have St. Brown, Puka, Collins, all of whom are top 10 receivers rest of season. We have Reed and Amari as great wide receiver depth pieces. So for me, I don't think that there's a world that you would ever start Jalen McMillan here. I think I would honestly rather roster Rome Odunze if it's just us chasing the highest ceiling possible down here at the very bottom end of the team. So I think we drop McMillan. I think you pick up Rome. Going over to tight end, we have Pitts and Kraft, really comfortable spot. I agree with you. Yes, of course, we want to go through and we want to see if we can sell a wide receiver depth piece like Reed and Amari with maybe like Rico Dowdle and go get an extremely strong running back for the playoff stretch. Go get somebody like CMC, of course. Now, the issue with it is the wide receiver depth pieces that you'd want to move on from are guys that would be almost impossible to get value for. Like you have both Reed as well as Amari coming off of disastrous performances here. So these are the guys that I would want to look to sell, but at the same time, I just think that it's going to be very difficult to do so. Trying to go through and think about what we could potentially do. Like if you get a spike week from Jayden Reed this week in a game where absolutely everybody is going to be watching against the Detroit Lions. I mean, if you can at that point turn around and sell Jayden Reed and Rico Dowdle for an elite RB, we do it. But the issue right now is the guys that are depth pieces that don't necessarily matter much for us here would be players that are coming off of really bad performances that we're not going to be able to sell for anything. So I think you do make one of those moves. For now, you're going to make the just pivots specifically with the waiver wire options. And then obviously we can look to reevaluate in the long run. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And again, it's a phenomenal team. We're 6-2. We're the second best team in the league analyzer. So it's not like there are a bunch of moves that you can make. Now, Haramir coming out says, I am 3-5. Do you like it? And then any other thoughts? Going on a 3-5 roster, it makes a lot of sense for us to move on from Pacheco, right? 3-5 team, it's kind of all about going through and trying to get an upgrade in the short term and being willing to sacrifice the long-term upside. So, I mean, if you're looking at Pacheco is a very clear sell in this kind of environment. I would love to go get London. I mean, Diontae, we don't know if he's going to be traded this week or next week. But I don't know if Smith to Diontae is like a massive downgrade here. It's definitely a downgrade. I don't know how big of a downgrade it is. So for me, yeah, I think you go ahead. I think you take London on a 3-5 team. I think it's a no-brainer, to be honest. Now, TJ coming out with the team review. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking advantage of that free team review, my friend. And I do want to reiterate, of course, if anybody else wants a free team review in any of the live streams that we're doing every single day, we still have that offer over on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting the 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, for tonight's game, you're going to be getting a free Russell Wilson pick, more than less than half a total yard. And you'll be getting a free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard as well for tonight's contest. Again, only with code FLOCK. Just make sure if you are wanting that free team review, you go ahead and you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way we're able to hook you up with the free team review voucher like everybody else here sitting with. Now, TJ says, happy to have a strong team, but worried about the depth, especially with Diggs possibly out for the season. It is definitely worrisome for a 14-team league. 14-team league, to lose Diggs, it's going to be a lot harder to replace than it would be in a 10-team format. They're going to grab in Juju, and if I get him, putting him in the IR, maybe grab Hutchinson, but it'll probably be all mixed in. Any trades you think makes sense for us. So I already have a feeling that we may be doing something here that I'd pretty much only recommend for you and maybe nobody else. But here, this team is still second in the league analyzer, and we are right there pretty much neck and neck with that first team for the top spot. So we still have a very strong roster. Now, with that, it's because of our elite assets at the very top. I mean, we are sitting here with Josh Allen, obviously with Allen, a quarterback that we can start every single week, regardless of the matchup. Don't really have much hesitation in saying that either. If you wanted to go pick up a backup quarterback like Stafford to prepare for the week 8 bye, I wouldn't fault you for it. Definitely not something that you are needing to do here, though. Looking at what we have at running back, We are currently rolling with Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor. So we have 2 top 10 running backs rest of season with the best player in fantasy in a 14-team league. So you love to see it. We have Tracy as a quality depth piece. Singletary as a quality depth piece. Typically, it's not going to be a big deal, but in a 14-team league, it is. We have Corum as the premium handcuff. I would rather have Braylon Allen as that handcuff back at the very bottom end of the roster over Blake Corum. Obviously, I'd rather have him for sure over Gus Edwards. I'm assuming Gus Edwards not taking up a roster spot, though. I'm assuming he's on our IR. I mean, if for whatever reason, somehow Gus Edwards is taking up a roster spot, you drop him right away. And then going over to receiver, we are just absolutely screwed here. We got A.J. Brown, and that's it. So really the only thing I think you could make an argument for with this team, and it's the exact opposite of what we usually say. It's the exact opposite of what you want to do in 99% of leagues. But here specifically for a 14-team league, if we could maybe sell an option such as Jonathan Taylor or Saquon Barkley and get back 2 viable starters, get back maybe a high-end RB2 and a low-end wide receiver 1, I think you could look to do it. Like, obviously, we need to find a team that's pretty strong and that has the depth to make that trade with us. This seems extremely strong here. I mean, if you maybe moved off of Jonathan Taylor and got back Aaron Jones and Brian Thomas, or Aaron Jones and Terry McLaurin, this team that's 6-1 that has all the depth in the world, I think they could afford to do that. While typically we're not wanting to give up the best player and get 2 in return, 14-team league with the Stephon Diggs injury, depth's going to be very hard to come by. Our options on waivers are absolutely garbage. And yeah, in terms of who you could go and look at with the waiver wire, I think pivoting from Cora, I think picking up Braylon Allen's a good idea. Dontavian Wicks could potentially be a viable pickup. Obviously, the issue with Wicks is you're in a situation in which he's maybe the wide receiver 4 in his offense where the starting quarterback just got injured. So it's not as easy to say, like, yeah, it's a no-brainer, let's go get him. So instead of going through and like looking at Xavier Hutchinson and stuff like that, I think it sucks. But I think you're in a spot in which we want to go through and we want to potentially sell one of our elite RBs, downgrade, get a high-end RB2, and a potential wide receiver 1 to backfill for the Diggs injury. Just because it's a 14-team league where obviously depth will be incredibly hard to come by. But I really appreciate you. And outside of that, we do have a strong team. It just sucks that we had the Diggs injury. Now, Dawson, always happy to see us, says, he said he really needs flex depth and willing to trade Geno. What should we do? Thanks once again. Thank you again. So, we looked at your team earlier in the stream. If I'm remembering correctly, yeah, this is a 1 quarterback format. So if this is a 1 quarterback format, Geno Smith doesn't really have much value. You're better off just going through and instead of giving up like Bucky Irving and Rico Dowdle for him, I mean, you're probably better off just going through and just picking up a quarterback off waivers. If you're trading for a QB, it has to be somebody that has the elite rushing ceiling. We want to go for somebody like Hurts. We want to go for somebody like Daniels. We want to be going for somebody like Lamar. I don't see what trading, say, Bucky and Dowdle for Geno Smith really accomplishes here. Now, our next question coming out from B Wood says, no one wanted to buy Jordan Mason, so we're now hurting for an RB2. Do you think this is a good trade to get one? Thanks, Mason. Thank you. We're giving up the best player with Lamar. We're going from Lamar to Kyler, clear downgrade. We are going from JSN to Harrison, clear upgrade. Dell to Jameson, clear downgrade post Diggs injury. And this is so we can trade Braylon Allen for Montgomery. I hate the idea of trading away Lamar Jackson. I think if we are desperate for an RB2, I understand where you're coming from, and I think you can go ahead and make this pivot. What I would personally probably do is I would try keeping Dell and letting them keep Jameson, given the injury that we have with Diggs. I think I would like this deal more if we were selling Lamar, Allen, JSN for Kyler, Montgomery, Harrison. I think this would be a no-brainer. Now, let me refresh, see if we had any more questions coming in. We have 3 more. We have another free team review here. I do want to reiterate, of course, if you want to get in any questions on the site, they will be answered pretty much immediately. All you got to do is go over to flockfantasy.com, hit the expert advice button in the top right corner. There you can send in a super message. You can send in a start sit question, a trade question, or get a full-blown team review, whatever you are wanting. The link is in the live chat as well. But if you were wanting the free team review, which is what pretty much everybody in this live stream has been getting so far, which is what I would definitely recommend to do, to be honest, because it's a lot cheaper. If you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free Russell Wilson pick, more than less than half a total yard. And you're going to be getting a free Malik Neighbors pick, more than less than half a total yard as well for tonight's game. And then on top of that, the free team review that we're doing in the live stream every single night. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com after or before, regardless. Make sure you have an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I know to hook up with that free team review voucher. Now let's move this over to our next question. And this is another one of those free team reviews coming out from Marcus. Appreciate you. Here, this is a 12-team league where you start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. Team name is... I don't even know what to say here. We're second in the league analyzer. I do know that. This is a league in which you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. And I believe this is a non-PPR format as well. Marcus, if you're in the live chat, would you mind confirming that this is a non-PPR league? Because that will change things. Obviously, with it being a non-PPR format, we are going to be skewing away from players that get raw volume in bad offenses. And instead, we are going to be looking at players that are in good offenses that have touchdown upside, even if they're maybe going to have fewer touches from a week-to-week perspective. Looking at this quarterback, we are currently rolling with Jaden Daniels. Obviously, when we have Daniels, this is a QB that you can start every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. Looking at, and obviously, what Teresa said also, this is for new Underdog accounts as well. And people want to see the first team. The first team is freaking nuts. The team number one has Kyron Walker, Bijan Taylor, Lamb, Chase, Neighbors, Nico. Obviously, any given Sunday, but we're going to have to get lucky against the playoffs to beat them. But anyway, if this is a non-PPR format, I absolutely love having Daniels because in a non-PPR league, quarterback is going to make up a higher percentage of our starting lineup output weekly. So Daniels, love to see it. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with Barkley, HN, and James Cook. All three of whom look to be in great offenses. I would say this is a non-PPR format. Probably not as excited about HN as we are in a full PPR league. Obviously with the Raheem Mostert goal line role. So HN clearly an RB1 rest of season in a full PPR format. But specifically in a non-PPR league, I wouldn't mind at all if you wanted to potentially move off of Devon HN and see if we can go get an upgrade elsewhere. And then looking at Jordan Mason, of course, I do think that we have probably past the point where you are going to get any value for him. I think you're just kind of probably stuck as is if you have him, right? Going over to receiver, wide receiver, again, we're not optimizing for the guys with the volume in a non-PPR format. We are optimizing guys for guys with touchdown upside. So it is going to be a little bit different. So when we're looking at like George Pickens, I think Pickens is a good example of like a receiver that you're the number one in your offense, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know if you're going to get a ton of touchdown upside here. I know you had the touchdown this past week. One thing I'll say is we for sure want to drop Alec Pierce and pick up Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's an absolute no-brainer. But if you could potentially sell like Dalton Kincaid and George Pickens and go pivot over to a wide receiver that should have a lot of touchdown upside in a very strong offense, I think I would look to do just that. Because, I mean, if you could potentially go through and get that upgraded receiver by going through and selling a tight end in a 2-for-1 deal. I mean, looking at what you have on the waiver wire, you can also just go out there and pick up Cade Otton for completely free. Which, if that's the case, I think that makes a ton of sense. So the moves we want to make on this team, 1, we cut Alec Pierce, you pick up JSN. 2, you cut Russell Wilson, you pick up Zach Charbonnet. 3, we potentially explore the possibility of trading a tight end with a receiver for a wide receiver upgrade, and then backfilling the tight end option with Cade Otton for free off the waiver wire. For me, that's what I'd be looking to do with this team. But again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that free team review. And dear God, we need all the help we can get to take down that team at the very top. Now, moving this over to Sleepy FF says, hey, Mason, I have Cade Otton and Sam Laporta looking to add depth at receiver or running back. Any suggestions? If you have both Cade Otton and Laporta, I'm not going to fault you at all for just going through and trading Laporta for Hopkins here. Another thing you could look to do is pivot over and instead get a running back like DeAndre Swift. I would trade, obviously, Laporta for Flowers. Those would be the initial offers that I would send. And then I think you could come down to Hopkins if he's not willing to give you Flowers, if he's not willing to give you Swift. You could maybe try to make a 2-for-1 deal where we are able to get an upgrade here to Garrett Wilson. I just think that's a lot less likely. But I think these would be like the first moves that I would send. And then obviously if we're not able to get any of those, and then the last resort is trading for Hopkins, you can. Now, moving over to our next question from The Deuce is Loose. As I'm 5-3 and my running backs are Cook, Chase Brown, and Bigsby, I for sure want to go with DeAndre Hopkins here. Obviously, had the multiple rushing touchdowns from Raheem Mostert this past week. But with that being said, HN has everything as a receiver. HN will have some of the work as the goal line back as well. I don't think every single goal line touch is always going to be going over to Mostert. So pivoting over to DeAndre Hopkins here, I think makes a lot of sense. I still view Hopkins as that wide receiver that you're probably going to be able to put in the flex spot going into the future when we get the expanded role here in KC. Obviously, don't act like this is prime DeAndre Hopkins by any means, though. But still, I mean, Hopkins is Hopkins. Okay. Now, let me move this over to I think we should be all caught up on the questions on the site. And let me see. Kame says, do I need to deposit on Underdog before I get the Malik Neighbors and Russell Wilson pick? Yeah, I mean, with all those offers over there on Underdog Fantasy, like to get the free team review voucher, you need a $10 deposit, which, I mean, you can find all the exact details, of course, in the description. Dax says, I made an Underdog account without a promo code, but I'd like to do the team review. How do I add a promo account to my existing account? If you've already made a deposit on Underdog Fantasy, it's going to be too late. You would have to use promo code FLOCK before you ever make an Underdog deposit. And you can, of course, always just go through and reach out to Underdog Fantasy and ask if they can add in a code if you have not. But yeah, if you wanted that free team review that we're doing in the live stream every night, or if you wanted like the free Malik Neighbors pick more than less than half a total yard, which is exclusive to code FLOCK users, you are going to be having to use code FLOCK before you make a deposit. And then you just have to make a $10 deposit. Teresa says, please explain how people can see your rankings specifically, please. I don't know how to answer that for them. If you wanted to see my rankings, you go over to flockfantasy.com. You go to the rankings page. You hit sort by. My name's Mason Dodd. You click Mason Dodd, and then you go ahead and sort by my rankings. Now, if you have a free account on flockfantasy.com, then you're not going to be able to do that. My rankings specifically will be behind a paywall. If you have a free account, you're going to get the expert average, which is the average of everybody that you see right here. It's the average of Avery, Danny, Nathan, myself, Zach, and Corey. Okay. Now, let's move this over. And if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Obviously, fantasy football questions, we're going to try to get to as many as we possibly can. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. JC says, Tank for Scary Terry or Brian Thomas Jr. I would rather have Scary Terry and Brian Thomas Jr. over Tank. I mean, really the only thing that you need to consider is what you have between Brian Thomas Jr. or Scary Terry. If Scary Terry was if Brian Thomas Jr. was out for 2 to 4 weeks, then I would rather have Scary Terry. If Brian Thomas Jr. is day to day, I'd rather have Thomas. But it is difficult where we've had conflicting reports where we were told early today that Brian Thomas Jr. was going to be out 2 to 4 weeks. And then we were told, I want to say later, about 2 hours later, that Brian Thomas Jr. was actually just day to day. So I don't know exactly what we should be expecting here, but I definitely would trade Tank for either one. I mean, even with the injury that you have to Diggs. Mustafa says, is Jordan Mason a drop or a stash? I have Pacheco coming back. So, I mean, obviously we've been talking about selling Jordan Mason for a little bit, but now, yeah, definitely you're not going to be able to sell him for anything anymore. If you were looking to do anything with Jordan Mason, I think that you are probably just going to go ahead and look to hold on to him. I mean, you're not going to be able to sell him for anything more. I'm sorry, sell him for anything anymore. Which does suck, but at the same time, there's an outside chance that you come out of the bye week and he's healthy and CMC is not. Like, while we're being told CMC is going to be good to go, obviously it's far from a guarantee. We just have no idea at this point. So I would still hold on to Mason if I had him. I'm not dropping him. Sojo says Pacheco trade value, question mark. I just simply don't know at this point. I mean, if you ever, let's do this. If you ever needed to know one of these, also love the profile pic, but all you do is go to the trade finder and go, oh, I want to see what Isaiah Pacheco is being traded for. You can go ahead and type in Pacheco. You can see trades that have been made with Isaiah Pacheco today. And this is completely free over there on flockfantasy.com. You can see that Pacheco was dealt for Hopkins, Stevenson, Jaleel with Garrett Wilson on his side. So I would way rather the Wilson Pacheco side. Somebody traded Amari and Pacheco for Terry and Stevenson. So it seems like the Pacheco price is close to what you have with Ramondre Stevenson. Would I be super excited to go through and trade Pacheco for Stevenson? No. But I mean, if you were absolutely desperate and you're in a situation in which, I don't know, you are 2-6 saying, it doesn't matter if Pacheco comes back in 3 weeks. If I lose this week, I'm done. Then obviously you can. I will say with Pacheco, obviously, one, it looks like the Chiefs have no reason to rush him back. I mean, they are the last undefeated team, and at the same time, they're like 8-point favorites over the Bucs here, probably about to be 8-0. And on top of this, if you're looking at what you have with the Chiefs, they actually play 3 games within a 10-day period at the very end of the season. 3 games within a 10-day period makes me just really not interested in like being super aggressive acquiring Pacheco. Plus, you sprinkle on the fact that you're having to deal with the toughest schedule for any player in the fantasy football playoffs. I mean, the third toughest schedule for any running back in the playoffs. So I think there are a lot of reasons to be a little bit hesitant here with Pacheco. Obviously, the instance in which you would want to trade for him is if you can get him as a throw-in and you're like 6-2, you're 7-1, then obviously go for it. But I have absolutely no idea what to expect. Okay. Now, let's move this over to our next question. Gatlin says, who can I get for CMC? Now would be like the worst time to sell McCaffrey in my mind. Like, if you held on to McCaffrey for this long just to sell him right before he comes back, I don't know what you're doing. If you're going to go through and look at McCaffrey trades currently. I mean, if you can sell him for Kamara, then sure, go ahead and do it. Like, I'd sell him for Kamara. I mean, but these are the trades. I mean, hell, if you can sell him for Gibbs, maybe you do sell McCaffrey. If you can sell CMC for Breece Hall, then yeah, go for it. But yeah, I'm kind of surprised to see this cost be so low on CMC with these trades in particular. Okay. Let's see. Matt says, who can we get for Tank Bigsby? Again, guys, this is completely free for you over there on flockfantasy.com. If you have any of these questions, just go ahead and throw these guys into the trade finder. Like, you can go ahead, throw Tank Bigsby in here, say, oh, I play in a full PPR league. I only want to look at trades in a full PPR format. Oh, I don't want to look at trades in an 8-team or 14-team league. Oh, I only want to look at trades in a 1-quarterback format. It'll filter down to the exact league settings that you want. So yeah, these are the trades with Bigsby. Somebody traded Bigsby and Dell for James Cook, Romeo Dobbs. That's interesting. Okay, so let me move this over and see if we have any more questions coming in on the site real quick. Looks like we have a super message coming out from Holy Heroes to start Tracy or Warren tonight. Need your thoughts. I'm going to go Tracy over Warren. I think from what we have seen so far this season, it's very difficult to expect that Jaylen Warren has any shot at being the starter here in Pittsburgh, but I do think you have that shot with Tracy. So I'm going to go ahead. I will take Tracy. Much worse offense, though. Now, Dowboy Stein coming out with a trade where we're sending Bijan for Jacobs, Bigsby, McLaurin. Says, just made this trade. Badly needed a receiver. Nico on the IR, Montgomery, HN are my other running backs. For me, I think Bijan's the best player here, but I mean, who did we have at receiver? We had Amari, Puka, and then you were going to get Nico. But I don't know if I love the deal, to be honest with you. But if you're telling me that you felt like you absolutely needed help at wide receiver, I mean, if you could turn around and sell Bigsby, flip Bigsby for a profit, I understand it. But I do think you got you sold the best player. You gave up the best guy. But let's move this over. And again, let's actually, real quick, I need to take advantage of the free Malik Neighbors pick that we have more than less than half total yard. Again, this is free for you if you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. The Malik Neighbors more than less than half total yard. Let me figure out what we want to be pairing this up with over there on Underdog. I actually don't mind Najee to have a touchdown. The reason being is Najee is vulture protected. So if Najee actually gets vultured at the goal line, then at that point, you get a refund with your pick'em. So I'm going to go with Najee to score a touchdown with my free Malik Neighbors pick. And we are going to go $10 to win 32. So that'll be $10 to win 32. And keep in mind, we do have the free the vulture protection with Najee Harris, where if Najee gets vultured at the goal line, we do get the refund anyway. So I actually don't know if I would like the Najee pick besides that, but with the vulture protection on Underdog, I do. And then also, it looks like we actually get 2 free Malik Neighbors picks. So that's exciting. Let's go ahead. Let's grab Malik Neighbors, and maybe we go with Pickens to have a touchdown. I just kind of want to have some fun in this game. What's the Pickens to score a touchdown with Neighbors? Here, that would be $10 to win a little over 40. So let's go ahead, and we have $10 for Najee for a touchdown, which would win a little over 30. $10 for Pickens to score a touchdown. That would win a little over 40. And obviously, both of those are with the free Malik Neighbors pick on Underdog. And let's move this over. And do we want to take the Russell Wilson discount? So if you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog, you're going to get an additional free Russell Wilson pick, more than less than half a total yard for tonight. Obviously, I have been on Underdog Fantasy for years now. So, I know that's a gimme pick on NBA. They have a bunch of NBA. Oh, you know what we can actually do? Let's throw an NBA pick in here. I don't care about any of this nonsense, but let's go with Dylan Brooks to not have 10.5 points, whatever it is. And then we can use the gimme pick. So that's a guarantee now. And then can we do something in tonight's game as well? And then can we go with Russ fewer than, I don't know. We're not going to mess with that. I don't want to try that. But anyway, you have the free gimme pick on NBA. You have a bunch of those free promos over there on Underdog. I would definitely recommend taking advantage of that free Malik Neighbors pick that was exclusive to code FLOCK users. And at the same time, if you are new to Underdog Fantasy, you're going to get the additional free Russell Wilson pick for tonight's game, more than less than half a total yard, and the free team review that we are doing on the live stream every single night. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com after you, or before, whenever it is, but just set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog, so I can accredit you with that free team review voucher. And again, I used my free Malik Neighbors picks to go with Pickens to have a touchdown, and then in a separate one for Najee to have a touchdown. So if Najee scores a touchdown, it was 10-30. If Pickens scores a touchdown, it's 10-40. So make sure you take advantage of that with the link in the live chat. Let me see if we have any last minute questions coming in. I believe we do not. So we are going to be ending this live stream here. Obviously, we'll be streaming after the game tonight, talking about everything that happens. Really do appreciate you and really hope that we get to see you then. And hopefully we have a decent game. It's probably going to be a stinker.